Story 1. The Smart House Glitch. This happened last October. I was 19 at the time, a sophomore in college, and like most students, I was completely broke. I was eating instant ramen for dinner 5 nights a week and picking up whatever odd jobs I could find on campus. So when my computer science professor asked if I wanted to house sit for him for a weekend, I didn't just say yes, I practically begged for it. He offered me $300 for 2 nights. All I had to do was feed his 2 golden retrievers, Buster and Bailey, and make sure the house didn't burn down while he and his wife went to a tech conference in Seattle. It sounded like the easiest money I'd ever make. When I got there on Friday afternoon, I was blown away. The place was incredible. It was one of those ultra-modern smart homes about 20 minutes out of town, completely secluded. It was surrounded by dense woods on all sides, with no neighbors for at least a mile. The architecture was all sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The professor gave me the tour. He was obsessed with automation. Everything, and I mean everything, was controlled by these tablets mounted on the walls in every room. The lights, the temperature, the blinds, the music, and especially the security system. He showed me how to use the app, gave me a guest passcode, and told me to help myself to the fridge. The first night was paradise. I ordered a pizza, played with the dogs in the massive living room, and felt like a millionaire for a few hours. It was quiet, peaceful, but the second night, that's when the isolation stopped feeling peaceful and started feeling heavy. It was around 11:30 p.m. on Saturday. A storm had rolled in, and the rain was hammering against all that glass. I was in the living room, sprawled out on the couch playing video games with my headset on. The dogs were asleep on the rug in front of me. Suddenly, the room changed. The recessed lighting in the ceiling, which had been set to a warm, dim orange, suddenly flared up to 100% brightness. It was blinding white like a hospital operating room. I ripped my headset off, squinting against the glare. Then, just as fast as it turned on, it dimmed all the way down to a deep blood red. My heart did a little jump, but I immediately rationalized it. It's a glitch, I thought. Rich people tech. I put my controller down and walked over to the wall-mounted tablet near the hallway to reset the lighting. The screen was glowing in the dark hallway. I tapped the icon for the living room lights, but it was frozen. Then, a notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. Front door. Unlocked manually at 11:31 p.m. My stomach dropped. I stared at the words, waiting for them to make sense. Manually? That meant someone had physically turned the deadbolt from the inside, or used a key from the outside. I turned my head slowly to look at the front door. It was heavy solid wood. It looked closed. I walked over to it, my socks sliding on the polished concrete floor. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It was locked. I checked the deadbolt. It was engaged. I let out a nervous laugh. Okay, I whispered to myself. System glitch. Stupid smart house. I went back to the tablet and checked the log. The notification was gone. The system showed all secure. I figured maybe the storm messed with a sensor or something. I tried to shake off the creepy feeling, but the house felt different now. Those floor-to-ceiling windows that looked so cool during the day, now they were just giant black mirrors reflecting the red light of the living room. I felt like I was in a fishbowl. I sat back down on the couch, but I didn't put my headset back on. I just sat there listening to the rain. 5 minutes later, I jumped. I looked at the tablet across the room. The screen lit up again. Back patio door. Unlocked manually at 11:36 p.m. This time, I didn't freeze. I felt a surge of adrenaline. The back patio door was glass. It was a sliding door in the kitchen, right behind the couch where I was sitting. I stood up. The dogs, who had been sleeping soundly this whole time, suddenly sat up. Both of them, at the exact same time. Their ears were pinned back. They weren't looking at me. They were looking toward the dark kitchen. Buster let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated in the room. I grabbed the heavy metal flashlight the professor kept in the kitchen junk drawer. I didn't turn it on yet. I crept toward the kitchen. The patio lights were off, so outside the sliding glass door was pitch black. I couldn't see anything but my own reflection and the red tint of the living room lights. I moved closer to the glass. I needed to see if the latch was undone. I pressed my face closer to the window, squinting into the dark yard. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, the backyard lit up. Standing about 3 feet from the glass was a man. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing a dark raincoat soaked through. He wasn't trying to pry the door open. He was holding a small gray device, like a car key fob, and he was pointing it directly at the lock. He looked up. He didn't run. He didn't look surprised that I saw him. He just smiled. A wide, rehearsed smile that showed way too many teeth. He raised the fob and clicked it again. The latch on the sliding door popped open right in front of my face. I didn't scream. I just reacted. I slammed the manual deadbolt shut, the one that wasn't connected to the smart system, and sprinted for the garage. I grabbed the dogs by their collars, dragged them into the professor's car, locked the doors, and called 911. The cops arrived 10 minutes later. The guy was gone, but when they checked the smart system logs, they found something that still keeps me up at night. The logs showed that the guest bedroom window had been opened at 10 p.m., an hour and a half before I noticed the lights. He hadn't been trying to break in. He had already been inside. He was just playing with me. Story 2, the night shift. I used to work the graveyard shift at a gas station off I-70. It was a boring job, mostly just truckers buying cigarettes and teenagers buying energy drinks. You learn to tune people out. You scan the items, take the cash, and stare at your phone until the next person walks in. But you never tune out the ones who don't act right. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Dead silence outside. No traffic on the highway. Just the buzzing of the lights. A beat-up gray sedan rolled into the lot. It didn't pull up to a pump. It parked right in front of the glass doors, facing the counter. The headlights stayed on, blinding me for a second, and the engine didn't cut off. A guy got out. He was tall, wearing a heavy winter coat, even though it was July. He walked in, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. It hit me as soon as the automatic doors slid open. It smelled like wet dog and copper, like old pennies. He didn't look at me. He didn't even acknowledge I was there. He walked straight to the back aisle where we keep the automotive stuff, oil, antifreeze, brake fluid. I watched him on the little security monitor behind the counter. He stood in front of the motor oil for 5 minutes. Not moving, not browsing, just vibrating, like he was shivering violently, but standing perfectly still. I started to get that prickling feeling on the back of my neck. I looked at the phone, wondering if I should pretend to make a call. Finally, he grabbed a bottle of brake fluid and turned toward the counter. When he walked up, my blood went cold. His eyes were wide open, bloodshot, and he wasn't blinking. But his mouth was set in a tight, straight line, like he was holding his breath. "Just this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to provoke him. He didn't answer. He reached into his coat pocket. I tensed up, my hand hovering near the panic button under the register, thinking he was grabbing a gun. Instead, he pulled out a handful of crumpled cash and dropped it on the counter. It was wet. I looked down at the money. It was covered in a dark, sticky substance. It wasn't oil. It was too red for oil. "Sir," I said. I didn't touch the money. He leaned in close, closer than anyone should. "It won't come off," he whispered. His voice sounded like he had gravel in his throat. It was wet and strained. I scrubbed it, but it won't come off. I looked at his hands. Under the dirt and grime, his knuckles were raw. The skin was scrubbed pink and bleeding. The dark substance on the money, it was on his cuffs too, stained deep into the fabric of that heavy coat. "I can call someone for you," I said. "Do you need help?" He slammed his hand on the counter. "Don't," he hissed. Then his face changed. The anger vanished in a split second, replaced by that same blank, wide-eyed stare. It was like a switch flipped in his brain. He grabbed the brake fluid, turned around, and walked out. He got in his car, but he didn't leave. He sat there, engine idling, staring at me through the glass. For 2 hours. I locked the front doors. I turned off the open sign. I hid in the back office, watching him on the grainy security camera. Every time a customer would pull in for gas, he would duck down in his seat, hiding below the dashboard. As soon as they drove away, he'd pop back up and stare right at the glass doors. I was terrified he was waiting for me to leave. I was terrified he was going to come back in. At 5 a.m., the big delivery truck for the morning pastries showed up. It was huge and loud. As soon as the truck pulled into the lot, the gray sedan floored it. He peeled out of the lot, running the red light at the intersection, and disappeared onto the highway. I told the morning manager when he arrived. He brushed it off, said it was just another junkie, and told me to get some sleep. But before I left, I looked at the crumpled bills he had left on the counter. I had put them in a plastic bag before dropping them in the safe. I looked closely. It wasn't paint. It wasn't grease. It was dried blood. I quit 2 days later. I don't know what he was trying to clean off his car or his hands. And honestly, I don't want to know. I just know that sometimes late at night, when I see a gray sedan idling in a parking lot, I can still smell that copper. Story 3. The Facebook Marketplace Trap. If something seems too good to be true, it is. I learned that the hard way, and I'm lucky I learned it without losing my life. I'm a musician, which is just a polite way of saying I'm broke. I collect vintage gear when I can afford it, which is almost never. But a few months ago, I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace at 2 in the morning and I saw it. A listing for a 1996 Fender Stratocaster in sunburst finish. The seller, a guy named Mark, listed it for $500. For anyone who doesn't know guitars, that instrument is worth triple that amount, easy. The description said he was cleaning out his grandfather's attic and just wanted it gone fast. The photos looked legit, dusty case, old strings, clearly sitting in an attic. I messaged him immediately. He replied the next morning, super polite, normal grammar. He said he had a few other people interested, but since I messaged first, I had dibs. We agreed to meet that evening at 7 p.m. I suggested a Starbucks in a town about 45 minutes away from me. It was a public place, well lit, totally safe. I asked my roommate Dave to come with me. Not because I was scared, really, but because I wanted someone to brag to about the deal I was getting. Plus, Dave is a big guy, played linebacker in high school, so having him there was a nice insurance policy. We got to the Starbucks at 6:50 p.m. We grabbed coffees and waited. 7 p.m. rolled around. No Mark. 7:15, still nothing. I texted him. Hey, we're here. Are you close? He replied instantly. Asterisk, so sorry, my truck wouldn't start. I'm at my storage unit waiting for a jump. It's only 10 minutes from where you are. Can you come here? I'll knock $50 off for the gas money. Asterisk. Dave looked at the text and shook his head. He said we should bail. He said it sounded sketchy, but I was blinded by greed. That extra $50 off plus the cheap guitar meant I was basically robbing this guy. I told Dave it was just a storage unit, probably one of those big public facilities with cameras and keypad entry. I told Mark we were on our way. He sent the address. It took us away from the main road, past the strip malls, and down into an industrial district that looked completely dead at night. The road turned from pavement to gravel. The streetlights disappeared. We pulled up to the pin drop. It wasn't a nice public facility. It was a row of rusted, corrugated metal sheds behind an abandoned auto body shop. There was a chain-link fence, but the gate was wide open. There were no lights, no cameras, just wind blowing through the weeds and the sound of gravel crunching under our tires. There was one vehicle parked at the far end of the row, a black SUV with tinted windows. I pulled my car up about 50 feet away from it. I kept the engine running, mostly because it was freezing outside. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. I'm in the SUV. Come take a look. It's in the trunk. Dave was gripping the door handle. He told me to keep the car in drive. He said he had a really bad feeling about this. I told him to relax, that I'd just go check it out quickly. I got out of the car. The cold air hit me instantly. The silence out there was heavy. The only sound was my boots crunching on the loose rocks. As I walked toward the black SUV, I tried to peer through the windows, but the tint was illegal dark. You couldn't see a thing inside. When I got about 10 feet away, I noticed something odd. The SUV wasn't running. There was no steam coming from the exhaust pipe. It was 30 degrees out. If he had been sitting in there waiting for a jump, he would have been freezing. I squinted at the windshield. I cupped my hands around my eyes to block the glare from my own headlights behind me. The driver's seat was empty. There was nobody in the passenger seat either. The car was completely empty. I froze. A sudden wave of panic washed over me, that primal instinct that screams predator. My phone buzzed in my hand again. I looked down. Asterisk, why did you stop walking? Come to the trunk. Asterisk. The text came through, but I hadn't seen a phone screen light up inside the SUV. That meant Mark wasn't texting me from inside the car. He was outside, watching me. I spun around. Behind one of the rusted metal sheds, about 20 feet to my left, I saw a shadow detach itself from the wall. It was a man. He was dressed in all black, hood up. He wasn't holding a guitar case. He was holding something long and metallic, a crowbar or a pipe. He didn't run. He just stepped out into the open, blocking the path back to my car. I heard Dave scream my name from the car. I didn't think. I just sprinted. I didn't run back toward the car because the man was in the way. I ran wide, circling around the back of the sheds, scrambling over piles of old tires and scrap metal. I could hear heavy footsteps behind me, crunching fast on the gravel. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't yelling stop or give me your wallet. He was just chasing me in total silence. I looped around the far side of the building and saw my car. Dave had thrown the passenger door open. I dove into the seat, scrambling over the center console as Dave slammed on the gas. As we peeled out, kicking up dust and rocks, I looked in the side mirror. 2 other men stepped out from behind the SUV. They had been hiding on the other side, waiting for me to walk past them so they could box me in. If I had gone to the trunk like the text asked, I would have been surrounded. They weren't selling a guitar. They were hunting. And the scariest part? When I checked the marketplace profile later to report it, the account was gone. But the photo of the guitar? I did a reverse image search. It was taken from an estate sale website, in a completely different state. Story 4, the delivery to nowhere. I drive for one of those food delivery apps to make extra cash for tuition. It's usually pretty chill. Listen to podcasts, drop off burgers, go home. But this happened on a Friday night last November, and it was the last delivery I ever made. It was pouring rain that night, the kind of rain where you can barely see the road markings. I was about to log off, but a high-paying order popped up. It was $80 worth of Chinese food from a nice place downtown. The tip was pre-entered as 0, which usually sucks, but the drop-off note said, * cash tip under the mat. Please do not ring doorbell. Baby sleeping. Bring to side door in the alley. I figured, whatever, cash is king. I picked up the food and drove to the address. It took me to an older part of the city, a neighborhood full of massive Victorian houses that had seen better days. The streetlights were mostly burned out or flickering. The house I pulled up to was dark. Not just everyone is asleep dark, but abandoned dark. No porch light, no light in the upstairs windows. I double-checked the address. This was the place. I grabbed the heavy paper bags, pulled my hood up against the rain, and headed for the alleyway. The note was specific, side door in the alley. The alley ran between the house and a tall wooden fence that separated the property from the neighbors. It was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide, and pitch black. I had to use my phone flashlight just to see where I was stepping. The brick wall of the house was on my left, towering over me, and the wet wooden fence was on my right. It felt like walking into a tunnel. I found the side door about halfway down the house. It was an old wooden door with a window in the top half. There was a single, dim yellow bulb buzzing above it, casting just enough light to see the concrete step. I looked down for the mat. There was no mat, just bare, cracked concrete. I sighed. Great. No tip. I figured maybe the wind blew it away, or maybe the customer was just a jerk. I set the food down on the step and pulled out my phone to take the proof of delivery photo. I held my phone up, framing the bags of food against the door. As the camera flash went off, the burst of light illuminated the glass window on the top half of the door. I almost dropped my phone. There was a face pressed against the glass. It was a man. He must have been standing there in the dark kitchen, completely silent, waiting for me. But the way he was standing, it was wrong. His forehead and nose were pressed so hard against the glass that his skin looked white and flattened, like a distorted pig snout. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at him, paralyzed. The flash faded, leaving us back in the dim yellow light of the porch bulb. He wasn't looking at me. That was the worst part. His eyes were wide and unblinking, but they were fixed on a point over my shoulder. He was looking past me, toward the entrance of the alley I had just walked through. And he was smiling, a wide, static grin that didn't move. He didn't open the door to take the food. He didn't wave. Slowly, painfully slowly, he raised one hand. He pointed a single finger. Not at me. He pointed behind me. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the alley was so narrow I couldn't just turn around and sprint without tripping. I took a step back, keeping my eyes on the man in the window. That's when I heard it. Behind me, in the darkness of the alley, the metal latch of the wooden fence clicked. It was a soft sound, but in that silence, it sounded like a gunshot. The gate to the neighbor's yard, the one I had walked past to get here, was slowly creaking open. Someone had been waiting in the neighbor's yard. They had waited for me to walk down the narrow alley, waited for me to get trapped between the house and the fence. The man in the window wasn't the threat. He was the distraction, or maybe the signal. I didn't wait to see who was coming out of the gate. I dropped the food and bolted. I couldn't go back the way I came because the gate blocked the path. I sprinted forward, deeper into the alley, hoping it connected to the next street. I was slipping on wet leaves and trash. I heard heavy boots hitting the pavement behind me. Fast. Aggressive. I hit the end of the alley and burst out onto the cross street. I didn't stop. I looped around the block, running in the middle of the road, screaming for help until I got back to my car. I scrambled inside and locked the doors, my hands shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I sped away, I looked back at the house. The man from the window was now standing outside in the rain, next to the bags of food. And standing next to him was a second figure. They were dressed identically. Dark hoodies, dark jeans. They were just standing there, side by side, watching my taillights fade. I called support to report the incident. They investigated the account. It had been created that night using a stolen credit card. And the house? I looked it up on Zillow the next day. It had been foreclosed on 2 years ago. Nobody lived there. The electricity had been cut off for months, which means that dim yellow light above the side door. They must have wired that up themselves, just to lure me to the exact spot they wanted me. Story 5, the GPS detour. I've driven cross-country 3 times in my life. I know the rules of the road. Stick to the interstate, keep your gas tank at least half full, and never, ever trust a GPS in the mountains. But last November, I broke that third rule, and I honestly believe I almost didn't make it home. I was driving from central Ohio down to the Carolinas to visit family for Thanksgiving. It's a long drive, about 8 hours, and I was cutting through the mountains of West Virginia. It was around 2 a.m. I was exhausted, fueled only by lukewarm gas station coffee and general anxiety. There had been a massive accident on I-77. Traffic was backed up for miles, just a sea of red brake lights sitting in the dark. I was idling there for 20 minutes when my Google Maps popped up with a new gray route. It said, alternate route found. Save 45 minutes. I didn't even think about it. I just wanted to keep moving. I took the next exit. It started fine. It was just a 2-lane state highway paved with painted lines. But then the GPS directed me to turn left onto a road called Old Miners Pike. As soon as I turned, the pavement ended. It turned into a narrow gravel track winding up the side of a mountain. The trees were so thick on either side that they formed a tunnel over the road, blocking out the moon. It was pitch black, the kind of dark where your high beams seem to just get swallowed up by the void. I lost cell service almost immediately. The bars on my phone dropped to no service, but the blue line on the GPS was still there, so I kept going. I drove for maybe 20 minutes, crawling at 15 miles per hour because the gravel was loose and the drop-off on the passenger side was steep. I was starting to regret this shortcut. I hadn't seen a house, a streetlight, or another car since I left the highway. Then I rounded a sharp, blind bend and had to slam on my brakes. There was a tree across the road. It was a massive oak tree, lying perfectly perpendicular across the track, blocking the entire path. I sat there for a second, my heart pounding against my ribs, just staring at the bark in my headlights. Something felt wrong immediately. I'm not an expert, but it didn't look like the tree had fallen naturally. There were no torn roots sticking up. There was no debris or shattered branches on the road. It looked clean. It looked like it had been cut down and dragged there. I put the car in reverse. I didn't care how dangerous it was to back down a mountain road in the dark. My gut was screaming at me to get out of there. I checked my rearview mirror to navigate backward. That's when I saw the headlights. A truck had pulled onto the road behind me. It was sitting about 50 yards back, just around the bend I had just come from. Its lights were off. The only reason I saw it was because my red brake lights were reflecting off its chrome front bumper. It was just sitting there in the dark, watching me. Then the truck's high beams flashed on. They were blindingly bright, probably customized LEDs. They flooded my entire car with white light. I shielded my eyes in the rearview mirror. I expected them to honk. I expected maybe a guy to get out and wave, offering to help move the tree. But nobody got out. The truck just sat there. Then it started to inch forward. I looked back at the tree in front of me. I looked at the ditch on the left side. There was a small gap between the trunk of the fallen tree and the muddy embankment. It was tiny, maybe just enough space for a small sedan if I didn't mind destroying my paint job. The truck behind me revved its engine. It was getting closer. I could see 2 silhouettes in the cab now. I didn't have a choice. I floored it. I yanked the wheel hard to the left. My car dipped into the muddy ditch, tilting dangerously. I felt the tires spinning in the slush, fighting for traction. I heard the horrible, screeching sound of metal scraping against rock as the undercarriage dragged over the edge of the ditch. I bounced over a massive tree root, my head hitting the roof of the car, and somehow, the car popped up onto the road on the other side of the tree. I didn't look back. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor. I sped down that winding gravel road faster than any sane person should drive. I was drifting around corners, kicking up rocks, praying I didn't slide off the cliff edge. About 30 seconds later, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror again. They were chasing me. For 10 minutes, it was a cat-and-mouse game on a mountain cliff. They were in a big pickup truck, so they were faster on the straightaways, gaining on me until their lights filled my entire cabin. But I was in a smaller car with a lower center of gravity, so I could take the sharp corners without braking as hard. Every time I slowed down for a hairpin turn, I could see them right on my bumper. They weren't trying to pass me. They were trying to run me off the road. Finally, the gravel spit me out onto a paved road. I saw a sign for a 24-hour gas station a mile ahead. I laid on the horn, speeding toward the lights of civilization like a maniac. As soon as the gas station canopy came into view, the truck behind me slammed on its brakes. I watched in the mirror as they whipped a violent U-turn in the middle of the road and disappeared back into the dark, heading back up the mountain. When I got to the station, I pulled right up to the front door, shaking so bad I couldn't get my keys out of the ignition. The clerk looked at me like I was crazy. I got out and walked around to the back of my car to check the damage. The entire passenger side was caved in from scraping the tree and the ditch. But that wasn't the part that made me throw up. Stuck in my back bumper, tangled in the plastic molding, was a length of heavy, rusted barbed wire. They hadn't just been chasing me. When we were stopped at the tree, they had pulled up close enough to try and hook my car to theirs. They were going to drag me back up that mountain. And if I hadn't gone into that ditch, they would have had me. Story 6, the host. I'm a graphic designer, and sometimes when I'm on a deadline, I need total isolation to finish a project. No friends, no distractions. So last January, I rented a small A-frame cabin in Vermont for a week. The listing had hundreds of 5-star reviews. The host, a guy named Elias, was a superhost with a perfect rating. The place looked perfect online. It was small, cozy, just a living room, a kitchen, and a loft bedroom upstairs. But when I arrived and read the welcome book on the kitchen counter, there was one weird rule highlighted in bold text. Asterisk, please do not attempt to open the basement door in the kitchen. It is used for owner storage and remains locked for your safety. Asterisk. Fair enough. I didn't need to go in the basement anyway. By Wednesday, I was deep in my work. It was snowing hard outside, a full blizzard that had buried my car in about 2 feet of powder. Around 10 p.m., I was in the kitchen waiting for the kettle to boil when I heard a noise. It was faint but distinct. A cough. A dry, muffled cough. And it came from behind the locked basement door. I froze, holding the kettle in midair. The house was silent except for the wind howling outside. I told myself it was the pipes. Old houses make weird noises when the heat kicks on, right? I tried to rationalize it. I went back to the living room, but I turned the TV volume down, straining my ears. 20 minutes later, I smelled it. Cigarette smoke. I don't smoke, and the listing was strictly non-smoking. The smell was faint at first, but then it got stronger. It was wafting up from the floor vents near the couch. My heart started racing. I grabbed a steak knife from the kitchen. Stupid, I know, but it made me feel better, and walked over to the basement door. I put my ear against the wood. I heard a voice. It was low, mumbled speech. Unintelligible, like someone muttering to themselves or talking on a phone very quietly. Someone was down there, and they weren't just storing boxes. I pulled out my phone. I didn't want to call 911 yet, because I wasn't 100% sure, and I felt crazy. So I messaged the host, Elias, through the rental app. I wrote, "Hey, is there someone in the basement? I hear noises and I smell smoke." He replied instantly. Asterisk impossible. I'm in Florida for the winter. The basement is empty. It's probably just the furnace acting up. The old heater smells like burning sometimes and makes clanking noises. Asterisk. I looked at the message. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was just being paranoid and that the voice was just the wind or the boiler. But then I looked at the floor vent again. The smoke wasn't coming from the furnace system. It was drifting up in a thin gray ribbon, like someone was exhaling directly into the ductwork below. I decided to leave. I didn't care about the snow. I didn't care about the money I'd lose. I started packing my bag in the living room, throwing my clothes in haphazardly. As I was zipping up my laptop case, my phone screen lit up. It had automatically synced with my laptop since they were on the same Wi-Fi network. A notification popped up on my screen from AirDrop. iPhone would like to share a photo with you. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. The device name sending the photo was *Elias's iPhone. He wasn't in Florida. You can only AirDrop if you are within 30 feet of the other person. He was right there. He was directly beneath my feet. I didn't decline the photo. I didn't accept it. I just grabbed my keys and ran for the front door. I left my charger, my toiletries, everything. I ran out into the blizzard, jumped into my car, and locked the doors. My car was buried, and for a terrifying second, the wheels just spun in the deep snow. I rocked it back and forth, slamming from reverse to drive, until the tires finally caught traction on the gravel driveway. As I peeled out onto the main road, I looked back at the cabin. The basement light had been turned on, and through the small, ground-level window that poked out of the snow, I saw him. A man was standing there. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was holding a phone up to the glass, filming me as I drove away. I drove straight to the police station in the next town. When they went back to investigate, they broke the lock on the basement door. They found a mattress, a hot plate, and a wall of monitors. The locked storage wasn't storage. It was his bedroom, and the monitors were hooked up to pinhole cameras hidden inside the smoke detectors in the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. He hadn't just been down there. He had been watching me the entire time. And if I hadn't smelled that smoke, I don't think he was planning on letting me leave. Story 7, the nice guy. They tell women to be polite. From the time we are little girls, we are taught not to be rude, not to make a scene, and to always give people the benefit of the doubt. That advice almost got me killed last year. I moved into my first solo apartment in September. It was a decent building on the north side of the city. It had a secure entry with a key fob and cameras in the lobby, so I felt safe. My apartment was on the top floor, unit 404. The day I moved in, my neighbor across the hall introduced himself. His name was Greg. He was older, maybe late 40s, balding, and always wore these knitted sweater vests. He seemed completely harmless. He even brought me a small potted plant as a welcome gift. He smiled and said that if I ever needed anything, sugar, a hammer, someone to carry groceries, he was right there. It started with small things. I'd come home from work and find a note slid under my door. It would say something like, "Saw you get home late last night. Make sure to lock the deadbolt." Or, "You look nice in that blue coat." It was creepy, sure, but I brushed it off. I told myself he was just a lonely older guy trying to be friendly. I didn't want to be the mean girl in the building. So, whenever I saw him in the hallway, I'd just smile tight-lipped and say thanks, then rush into my apartment. Then things escalated. I'd be sitting in my living room watching Netflix at night, and I would hear a sound at my front door. It was a soft, rhythmic scratching, like someone dragging their fingernails lightly down the wood grain. I'd mute the TV and creep over to the peephole. But every time I looked out, the hallway was empty. I figured maybe it was a draft, or maybe the building settling. But deep down, I knew that sound. It was deliberate. One night in November, I came home from a friend's birthday party around 2 a.m. I was a little tipsy, fumbling with my keys in the hallway, when Greg's door opened. He didn't turn on his lights. He just stood there in the dark of his apartment, illuminated only by the hallway fluorescence. He was just staring at me. He said, "You're home late." He wasn't smiling this time. His face was blank. I laughed nervously and finally got my key in the lock. I said, "Yeah, just hanging out with some friends." He took a step out into the hallway. He asked, "Which friends? The guy with the red hat? Or the tall one?" I froze. My blood turned into ice water. I hadn't told him where I was going. And those friends he mentioned? They hadn't come to the apartment building. I had met them at a bar downtown, 3 miles away. The only way he could know about the guy in the red hat is if he had followed me. I didn't answer him. I slammed my door shut, threw the deadbolt, locked the chain, and backed away. I went straight to my bedroom and sat on the bed, shaking. I decided right then that I was breaking my lease. I was going to call the leasing office first thing in the morning and tell them everything. I took my shoes off and laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm my breathing. The apartment was dead quiet. And then, I heard it. It was a quiet, rhythmic squeak, like bed springs compressing. But I wasn't moving, and it wasn't coming from my bed. It was coming from above me. I lay there, paralyzed. I was on the top floor. There was no apartment above me. There was just a maintenance crawl space and the roof. I slowly stood up on my mattress so I could get a closer look at the air vent cover in the ceiling. It was right above my bed. The screws on the vent cover were loose. They were hanging down by a thread. And inside the darkness of the ductwork, I saw a glint. A wet reflection. Someone was lying in the crawl space, looking directly down at me. Then, a voice whispered from the vent. It was Greg's voice. He whispered, "I can see you." I screamed. I didn't grab my shoes. I didn't grab my coat. I grabbed my phone and ran into the bathroom, locking the door and curling up in the bathtub. As I dialed 911, I could hear him scrambling above the ceiling tiles. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. He was moving fast, crawling over the drywall toward the bathroom vent. The police got there in 4 minutes. They kicked down my front door. They found a maintenance hatch in the hallway closet, the one right outside my apartment, that had been pried open. Greg had rigged a sleeping bag up there in the crawl space. He had a flashlight, a bottle of water, and a drill. He had drilled small holes looking down into my bedroom, my living room, and even my shower. The scratching at my door hadn't been him trying to break in. It was him testing the locks to see if I was home, so he would know when it was safe to climb down from the ceiling while I was gone. He had been in my apartment dozens of times. The police found photos on his phone of me sleeping, photos taken from inside my room. So ladies, listen to your gut. Be rude. Be loud. Make a scene. Because the nice guy across the hall might be the most dangerous monster you'll ever meet. Story 8, The Whistling. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I've been camping since I was a kid. I know the woods. I know what bears sound like. I know what cougars sound like. And I know that the forest is never truly quiet. There is always wind in the pines, crickets, frogs, the sound of water. If the woods go silent, it means a predator is near. It's nature's alarm system. I was on a solo trip in the Olympic Peninsula, miles off the main trail. I wanted to get away from the crowds and clear my head. I had hiked in about 6 miles to a spot near a small river valley. It was beautiful. Tall ancient pines, thick ferns, total isolation. I set up my camp, ate dinner, and hung my bear bag. By 10 p.m., I was in my tent, reading a book by the light of my headlamp. Then the silence hit. It was instant. 1 second, the frogs were croaking and the wind was rustling the leaves. The next second, nothing. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the valley. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. I put my book down. I sat up, listening. My skin was prickling. I reached for the knife I keep in my boot. And then I heard it, whistling. It wasn't a bird. It was a clear, melodic, human whistle. And it was a tune I recognized. It was the theme song to that old sitcom, The Andy Griffith Show. A happy, upbeat little tune. But it was coming from the other side of the river, deep in the dense brush, maybe 50 yards away. "Hello," I called out. The whistling stopped immediately. I waited. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "I'm camping here," I yelled, trying to sound tougher than I felt. "Just letting you know. I have a weapon." Nothing. No footsteps. No response. Just that dead, heavy silence. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and unzipped the tent mesh. I stepped out into the clearing. I shone the beam across the river. The water reflected the light, but the trees on the other side were a wall of black. I scanned the tree line, left to right. Then I saw it. About 7 feet off the ground, caught in the edge of my beam, were 2 eyes. They reflected the light like a cat or a deer, glowing yellow-green. But they were spaced wrong. They were too far apart to be a bear, too far apart to be a cougar, and they were staring right at me. "Hey!" I shouted, waving the light. The eyes blinked, and then the whistling started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from across the river. It was coming from above me. I threw myself backward, tripping over my own fire ring, and scrambled away from the trees. I shone the light up into the canopy directly over where my tent was pitched. Whatever it was fast. I saw a pale, long limb snap back behind a thick pine branch. It looked like human skin, but hairless. And the way it moved, it was fluid, like liquid. I didn't pack my gear. I didn't take my tent. I didn't even put out the fire. I just ran. I ran blindly into the dark, away from the river, using my flashlight to dodge trees. I was tearing through thorn bushes, tripping over roots, sprinting toward the logging road I had hiked in on. Behind me, I could hear it moving through the canopy. It wasn't touching the ground. I could hear heavy branches snapping and leaves rustling high above my head. It was following me from the trees. It was keeping pace with me perfectly. And the whole time it was whistling. That same happy, upbeat sitcom tune. But it was changing. The pitch was getting lower, slower, distorted, like a record player running out of batteries. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until I couldn't feel my legs. I eventually hit the main logging road, and I didn't stop until I saw the headlights of a ranger truck patrolling the area at 4 a.m. I flagged him down, waving my arms like a maniac. I was covered in scratches, bleeding, half frozen. I told the ranger there was a bear stalking me. I didn't tell him about the whistling. I knew he wouldn't believe me. He drove me back to my car at the trailhead. But here's the thing that made me stop camping forever. The thing that makes me lock my windows at night, even though I live in the city now. A few weeks after that trip, I was looking up the area online. I found a forum post from a missing persons page. A guy had gone missing in that exact river valley 2 years ago. They never found a body, just his tent ripped to shreds. I found his YouTube channel. He was a vlogger who made solo camping videos. I clicked on his last video. It was a vlog from the day he disappeared. He was hiking into the woods, filming himself with a selfie stick, talking about how beautiful the river was. And in the intro to the video, he was whistling. He was whistling the theme song to the Andy Griffith Show. That thing in the woods, it wasn't just watching. It was mimicking. It ate him, and it learned his song. And now it knows my voice too. So to anyone hiking in the Olympic Peninsula, if the woods go quiet and you hear a happy little whistle in the dark, don't look up, just run.